General Cavor Thrix of the Orzanth Dominion had conquered 12 star systems, 3 luxury moons, and a really annoying interstellar casino. His war record was flawless, his crystal-plated armor always gleaming, and his ego inflated to the size of a dwarf star. He was not, however, prepared for Earth. As his flagship, the exemplary Incineration, approached orbit around the blue planet, a red alert pulsed across every screen. Critical error. Humanity detected. His comms officer panicked and spilled ceremonial glitter on the navigation console. "What do you mean they still use projectile weapons?" Thrix demanded, gesturing wildly with all 4 arms. "And what the blazes is duct tape?" Moments later, the flagship's hull dented inward from an internal explosion. The source? A rogue vending machine commandeered by Earth's response team, specifically Gunnery Sergeant Jules Brickhouse Madison. Freshly yanked out of retirement like a war god summoned with coffee instead of candles, she had landed on the Orzanth, command ship disguised as a repair tech. 5 minutes and 1 weaponized soda later, she'd turned a snack dispenser into a subspace mine using chewing gum, sarcasm, and a hostile alien's own boot. Now, as fire suppression drones squealed and tentacled officers cried over their exploded lunchroom, Jules stood atop the flaming ruins of Deck 7, holding her espresso like a trophy and muttering, "That's what you get for calling Earth strategically irrelevant." Meanwhile, Thrix retreated to his command chamber, pacing under a holographic bust of himself labeled "Glory in Velvet." His pride was dented, his ship was on fire. His intel said Earth was primitive, still dealing with indoor plumbing and celebrity politicians. Instead, he'd encountered a walking combat doctrine in female form who could disassemble a drone, while making fun of his boots. Worse, she had a face that said, "I'm not mad, I'm disappointed, and armed." Back on Earth, UID, United Irregular Defense analysts were eating popcorn while watching the live stream. Captain Rick "Skids" Travers, Jules's assigned tech officer and unofficial tactical DJ, replayed the vending machine incident in slow motion, adding dubstep. "I told you she was ready," Skids said between fistfuls of protein chips. "She once turned a broken printer into a railgun in Nevada." The UID command had only shrugged. After all, Jules had a titanium spine, 17 confirmed alien dialects, and 0 diplomatic patience. Her idea of peace talks involved blowing something up until no one wanted to argue anymore. Aboard the wrecked Orzanth cruiser, Jules now had Thrix's attention and most of his ship's targeting arrays. But every time he locked onto her location, she was already somewhere else, leaving behind trail mix, taunts, or a spray-painted insult in perfect Orzanthian grammar. "Your tactical positioning is as reliable as your Emperor's hair implants," she scrawled on a hallway wall. Morale among Orzanth troops plummeted. One lieutenant defected just to stop the bullying, and yet, despite all logic, Thrix couldn't bring himself to deploy the doomsday cannon. "We must maintain decorum," he growled. "This isn't a skirmish, it's a performance." "She's performing all right," muttered his adjutant. "Performing you into a diplomatic nightmare." At 0400 Earth Standard Time, Jules finally sent a transmission. Her face filled the main holoscreen, backlit by flames, sipping her tactical espresso labeled diplomacy fuel like it was an ancient weapon. "Hey, Thrix," she said, smirking. "You ever consider designing your ships in a material other than explodium?" The general blinked all 4 eyes. What?" "Because I sneezed, and your portside thruster fell off. Also, I borrowed your guard captain's cape. It's flammable. You're welcome." Then she winked. Thrix fainted. The transmission cut. Across the fleet, confused Orzanth officers began to quietly deactivate weapon systems. No one had briefed them on what to do when the enemy weaponized SAS. In the aftermath, Earth declared victory not with a battle cry, but with a hastily edited slideshow titled, "Why You Suck at Galactic Conquest, a Tactical Review by Sergeant Madison." It included charts, memes, and a frame-by-frame replay of the vending machine incident annotated in Comic Sans. Thrix's advisors urged him to respond with force. He considered it, briefly. But then he remembered the expression on Jules's face when she sipped coffee before detonating a cafeteria. With a flip-flop and a prayer, he issued a new order instead. Do not engage without espresso-grade shielding. And thus began the worst diplomatic week of his life, with his only hope of survival resting on convincing the galaxy he meant to surrender all along. General Cavor Thrix sat in his glimmering throne of electro-polished obsidian, visibly sweating through his cape as his adjutant read the casualty report with the enthusiasm of a man slowly realizing he might be outlived by the potted plant next to him. 4 cruisers imploded, sir. 1, self-yeeted into a wormhole, apparently to avoid further human sarcasm. And the cafeteria drone, well, it joined the humans. Voluntarily. Thrix groaned, slapping his forehead with all 4 hands before accidentally poking himself in the eye. Meanwhile, Gunnery Sergeant Jules Brickhouse Madison reclined in a shockingly ergonomic alien chair aboard the stolen Orzanth light frigate Inevitable Pageantry, sipping her radioactive-looking espresso through a titanium straw and reviewing the intercepted Orzanth diplomatic files. Formal titles, planetary conquest orders, 57 different uniform requirements, and, wait, hold up, mandatory pre-invasion jazz hands? She muttered, flipping through pages with mild disgust. No wonder they're losing. Her voice echoed across the bridge, where Captain Rick Skids Travers had jury-rigged the ship's comms to blast Earth's most intimidating psychological weapon, an endless loop of Britney Spears and tactical bagpipe solos. Incoming transmission, Skids said through a mouthful of freeze-dried nachos, jabbing a glowing button that made a fart noise. On screen appeared General Thrix, now wearing what could only be described as a diplomatic sequin shroud, trying to look imposing while his backdrop glitched between flaming control panels and a fleeing janitor bot. "Human!" Thrix boomed, voice cracking. "This is your final warning. Surrender now and perhaps your coffee glands will be spared." Jules squinted. "You look like a disco ball had a stroke. Is this a hostage situation or a costume?" "Party." She took another slow sip from her diplomacy fuel mug, then tapped a few keys. Behind her, a countdown started ticking on the Orzanth's forward monitoring array. Thrix blinked. "What is that? What are you—" "Just installing the latest patch," Jules said sweetly. "UID Quantum Blender Bomb, V2.1. New feature, existence disruption. Less boom, more psychological collapse. Watch closely. I think it's got fireworks." Seconds later, the Orzanth flagship's comms tower folded in on itself like a bad soufflé. Thrix stared at the ruins through the holoscreen, mouth twitching. "That was our ceremonial broadcast hub." "Oops," said Jules, deadpan. "Guess you'll have to tweet your surrender the old-fashioned way, via screaming." Thrix's hands shook. He'd faced down a 3-headed war hydra. He'd quelled uprisings with just a dramatic monologue and glitter bombs. But this espresso-wielding hurricane of dry wit and casual demolition was breaking him. "Fine," he snarled. "We'll parley. Terms. Face to face." "Coffee first," Jules said. "And bring snacks. I don't negotiate on an empty stomach." Hours later, aboard a neutral orbital platform converted into a makeshift conference room, mostly storage crates and one confused jellyfish ambassador, the Surrender Summit began. Jules strolled in wearing UID combat armor accessorized with a bright pink lanyard reading Tactical Problems Department. Thrix waited with a forced grin, sweating as he watched her casually place a glowing thermos labeled Peace Juice on the table, like it might explode. "Your terms, human," he said through clenched mandibles. Jules handed over a PowerPoint file on a USB drive shaped like a donut. "It's titled, Why You Suck at Galactic Conquest," she said helpfully. "Slide 7's my favorite, bar graphs and everything." Thrix hesitated, then opened the file on the projector. It began with a gif of his own ship exploding in reverse while playing Earth's national anthem on kazoo. A silence fell over the room like a stunned slap. "You're insane," he whispered. "I prefer creatively assertive," Jules said, swirling her coffee. "Now, you get two options. 1. You surrender, keep your limbs, maybe even get a nice Earth visa. 2. I explain what a sarcasm field is. It involves quantum disorientation, psychological breakdown, and a slideshow of your worst decisions autoplaying at every diplomatic summit across the galaxy." Thrix, with the haunted expression of a man who just realized he's not even the main character in his own downfall, glanced nervously at his guards, who were already slowly backing away. "Very well," he said, defeated. "I accept the EO. Coffee." "Good," said Jules, passing him a steaming mug. "It's decaf. I'm not a monster." Behind them, Skids cheered from the comms room, adding EDM beats to the surrender audio. The Orzanth Dominion's command ship, monitoring the live broadcast, quietly marked its surrender protocol with the annotation, "Earth, do not engage. Send flowers and apologies." The galaxy had no idea, but they were about to learn that Jules Madison wasn't the ambassador Earth wanted. She was the one they deployed when bored and caffeinated. The moment General Cavor Thrix officially surrendered, the Orzanth Dominion's upper command chain reacted with the sort of dignified composure you'd expect from an empire built on sequined fascism, namely, a full-on plasma-infused meltdown. Somewhere in the golden halls of the Crystal High Citadel, someone screamed, "He drank the coffee!" just before a loyalist admiral punched a hole in the conference table with his ceremonial scepter, and someone else hurled a flaming cape through. The stained glass portrait of the Emperor's six-pack abs. The news of Thrix's surrender hit the Orzanth network like a tactical meme strike, complete with animated GIFs of the general sipping his mug and the word "Yikes" flashing across the screen in 3 dialects. It wasn't long before the palace was on fire, again, not due to human interference, but because a junior officer decided to brew victory tea in a fusion reactor out of spite. With the Emperor furiously wrapped in a bathrobe yelling about treasonous fashion heresy, rebel factions rose from every corner of the Dominion. Some wanted democracy, others just wanted to stop being required to wear capes in 90% humidity. Leading the charge was the exiled strategist Helya Varn, a cold-blooded genius who treated rebellion like corporate restructuring and managed her uprising using color-coded spreadsheets and weaponized memos. Meanwhile, Gunnery Sergeant Jules Madison, Earth's interstellar chaos vector in tactical boots, wasn't even aware she'd accidentally triggered a civil war. She was too busy hosting a mandatory morale-boosting BBQ for the surrendered. Orzanth officers, now awkwardly quartered on a captured space barge, affectionately renamed the Saucy Sanction. "Welcome, y'all," Jules bellowed, standing on a crate labeled "Caution Tactical Ribs." Tonight's menu, alien ribs, human rights and 1-1 existential crisis per prisoner served hot. She tossed an apron reading "Smoked you fair and square" at General Thrix, who had begrudgingly accepted his new role as Earth's most confused culinary assistant. "Why do I have to baste the meat?" he grumbled. "Because you basted." "Your empire, sweetheart," Jules shot back. "Now keep stirring unless you want to learn what happens when I microwave diplomacy." Surprisingly, the Orzanth troops, once famed for their loyalty, laser salutes, and severe fiber intake, were adjusting remarkably well. Turns out, decent Wi-Fi, edible food, and not being psychically screamed at during mealtime made a strong case for Earth-style rehabilitation. Jules made sure their quarters had everything: hollow bunk beds, gaming consoles, and even a support bot programmed to whisper affirmations like, "You are not a failure just because you lost to a single sarcastic human." Meanwhile, Captain Rick Skids Travers was DJing the welcome party from a makeshift bridge booth, blasting a mix of war drums, mariachi music, and Earth's top 40 hits remixed for galactic paranoia. This one's for all the brave alien captives who never expected surrender to taste like barbecue sauce and freedom. he announced, throwing confetti made from shredded Orzanth dress codes. But far from the glowing grills and jazzed-up alien prisoners, HFY Vaughn watched the chaos unfold from her rebellion flagship, the bureaucratic menace. She observed Thrix's surrender, BBQ, with an emotion best described as disdainful amusement. "So Earth's greatest weapon is party-based psychological warfare," she mused, sipping mint tea while cross-referencing the casualty reports with fashion violation stats. Interesting. Her advisors urged a counterstrike. Instead, HFY opened diplomatic channels and requested a meeting, not with the Emperor, who was currently threatening to declare war on Sox, but with Jules Madison. The message was brief and clear. "Earth has accidentally destabilized our government. Please advise." Jules, midway through flipping alien ribs and casually explaining what sarcasm was to a curious Orzanth sergeant, squinted at the comms screen. Did she just say please? Skids looked up from the karaoke console. She also included her spreadsheet on Rebel resource distribution. It's color-coded. Jules grinned. Finally, a war criminal with organization skills. Within 72 hours, UID granted provisional clearance for Jules to engage in unofficial peacemaking negotiations, or as she called it, a casual chat with Galactic HR. She arrived aboard HFY's ship in full tactical gear, holding a clipboard, a glowing thermos, and a confident smirk that could legally count as a weapon in 12 systems. "Madison," HFY said coolly, "you've caused widespread cultural collapse, diplomatic failure, and culinary unrest." Jules shrugged. "Thanks. It's my side hustle." And with that, the galaxy took a breath, because something strange was happening. The Orzanth Empire wasn't just losing, it was changing. Because when Jules Madison threw a BBQ, prisoners stopped praying for rescue and started asking for recipes. When she marched into a diplomatic summit, alien generals took notes on her, coffee-to-destruction ratio. And when Earth brought peace, it came with sarcasm, Wi-Fi, and medium-rare steak. The galaxy wasn't ready, but Jules was just getting warmed up. The coronation was scheduled for noon, but by 09:17 Galactic Mean Time, the ceremony had already descended into dignified panic. Jules Brickhouse Madison stood at the center of the Orzanth Reformation Hall, a freshly defanged palace now converted into a government conference center/open buffet, wearing her formal tactical armor with an embroidered sash that read Interstellar Liaison Commander, Accidental. Her expression hovered somewhere between "try me" and "I will end your entire bloodline over bad coffee." Around her, a dozen Orzanth dignitaries attempted to rehearse the peace treaty's ceremonial chant, though it mostly sounded like someone gargling honor with a side of political nausea. General Thrix, now awkwardly recast as Earth's official ambassador to the Orzanth, read glorified apology consultant, was adjusting his ill-fitting Earth diplomat uniform, complete with elbow patches and a lapel pin that read, "I screwed up, but I'm trying." Strategist HFY Vaughn sat on the dais like a galactic librarian who had just reorganized an empire and now needed a stiff drink. "We need to begin," she announced, glaring at a hovering minister who was frantically trying to translate the phrase "kick rocks" into formal Orzanthian. Jules glanced at the clock and sighed. "Fine. But I swear to gravity, if someone hands me another ceremonial fruit platter, I'm going to weaponize the pineapple." The newly proposed treaty, the Unified Peace Initiative for Post-SAS Galactic, Stability, UPIPSGS, because even the acronym was exhausting, was set to be signed at exactly 12:00. The document, which included clauses like no more conquest without written consent and mandatory chill zones in all war rooms, was sealed inside a glowing diplomatic holocube that kept playing the Earth national anthem every time someone touched it. Just before the signing, however, an emissary stumbled in, carrying a steaming plate. "We bring Earth's most sacred dish for ceremonial bonding," he declared. "The jalapeno burrito." "Oh no," Jules muttered. "You didn't." But it was too late. Thrix, still eager to prove his loyalty and possibly reclaim some fragment of his pride, had already taken a massive bite. What followed was less diplomacy and more interpretive warfare. Thrix went full quadruple limb flail, knocking over a ceremonial water sculpture, triggering 3 translation drones into emergency shutdown, and managing to hit the treaty holocube with enough force to activate its built-in celebratory anthem mode. As God Bless the Coffee Grounds blared from every speaker, Jules watched Thrix crash into the treaty table, gasping, "My mouth is performing treason." She calmly handed him a glass of milk. "Congratulations, you just achieved intergalactic unity through lactose." Somehow the treaty was signed, mostly because Helia refused to let a burrito derail months of strategic rebellion. The holopens clicked, seals blinked, and the treaty became official law. The Orzanth Empire, once known for conquering planets with choreographed laser shows and monocle-slapping declarations, was now split into 2 factions. The Progressive Reformation led by Helia and the Old Guard, who now mostly sulked in bunkers watching reruns of Thrix's surrender with crying emojis. Earth, much to its own surprise, had gained full galactic recognition and a permanent seat on the Interstellar Stability Council, a governing body Jules described as a daycare for war criminals with delusions of grandeur. Her first act as Earth's galactic representative was banning motivational executions and replacing them with mandatory dance breaks. Her second act was ordering more tactical espresso. "We didn't win this war," she told a confused alien press corps during the post-treaty press conference. "We aggressively out-weirded it until everyone gave up." Helia, watching from behind a stack of newly drafted civil codes, merely raised her teacup and muttered, "Honestly, it worked." As the celebration turned into what could only be described as a disco-themed peace rave with holographic doves, vomiting glitter and skids scratching turntables over a backdrop of interstellar bagpipe remixes, Jules stood near the center stage, arms crossed, watching it all unfold like a military commander trying not to admit she was proud of this nonsense. Thrix shuffled over, still teary-eyed from the burrito, but now holding a new mug labeled "Earth Sucks Less Than Expected." "You are a terrifying diplomat," he admitted. "You're not so bad yourself," Jules replied, "for a guy who once tried to enslave my planet and now makes excellent guacamole." The two stared out at the dance floor where an alien senator was currently breakdancing with an ex-prisoner turned grill master. Peace had never looked so absurd or so permanent. And as Jules took one final sip from her glowing mug, the galaxy officially learned what Earth had sent in place of ambassadors: a Navy SEAL with a caffeine dependency, a war crimes sense of humor, and enough sarcasm to rewire an empire. Peace was declared. The galaxy partied. And somewhere, deep in the bureaucratic archives of the Interstellar Council, a sticky note was quietly attached to Earth's official file: "Do not engage. Offer coffee and step away."